It may surprise you to hear that in Australia, deaths by suicide are higher than the road toll. 7 people take their own lives every day. Yet for years, suicide's been a taboo subject. Media outlets are discouraged from reporting them, and when they are covered, they're couched in euphemisms like no suspicious circumstances. Now there's a push for a more open public debate on the suicide epidemic that's touching or ending many Australian lives. Lisa Whitehead reports.
These are some of the faces of a national tragedy. More than 2,000 lives are lost to suicide each year. The overwhelming majority are men, but suicide is the leading cause of death for men and women under the age of 34.
I wake up every day knowing my kids are not here. They'll never be here. I'll never see them smile. I'll never see them cry. I'll never hear Happy Mother's Day, Mum, Happy Birthday, Mum, you know? And, you know, I've got to live the rest of my life like that.
Kayleen Donoghue has endured unimaginable grief. She lost 2 sons, Terry and Brad, and her daughter Tracy to suicide.
I didn't want to remember anything. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't care whether I got up at all. I didn't care whether I survived, I don't think.
In 1993, at the age of 21, Kayleen Donoghue's eldest son Terry committed suicide after a series of relationship issues and a battle with alcohol. His younger brother Brad struggled to come to terms with his death and turned to drugs. 6 years later, he also committed suicide. Their sister Tracy, a mother of 4, was devastated. She also lost her partner to illness and in 2003 took her own life. In an attempt to make sense of what happened, Kayleen Donoghue eventually found solace in writing and helping others.
After you lose somebody and you start to come out of that fog, it's like you go through a lot of that, like feeling so guilty. Why couldn't you have done something? Why couldn't I have seen it coming, you know?
It's a question often asked after a suicide. Actor Heather Bradley was 26 when she took her own life in 2005. She'd been struggling with drug addiction and was finding it hard to cope with her mother's death. Her father John says he felt he was to blame.
I felt that at the time of my daughter's greatest need, I wasn't there to help her. So I felt a failure as a father, as a protector, that I had failed in my duty. So I went through a stage like that. That I suppose a stage of almost giving up myself as to, you know, why keep on going when you think of all the plans that you do and you have for your children.
This Melbourne father shared the same roller coaster of emotions. Joseph Pozzolo's only child, Paul, was a tennis champion and a bright student, but he'd also been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and suffered from depression. He suicided at the age of 24. Joseph Pozzolo says after his son's death, he felt shunned by his community.
Even my neighbours didn't know what to do either, so they would sort of stay away too, you know, turn the other way or go back in their houses or whatever. Once again, because they didn't know what to say or what to do, but it made it worse for me.
It's almost like people reel away, you know, they'll say, how did your daughter die? And I say that she took her own life, and it's like, or that's a gentle way, I suppose, of saying suicide. And but people are just suicide, and it's, oh yeah, and what's the weather going to be like? And they want to change the subject, they don't want to talk about it.
Sadly, a lot of the community look at them and say, well, there must have been something wrong in the home, you know, and they put the blame, which is incorrect, sometimes on the family. Say, well, what happened in the family for that person to take their life? It's far from the truth.
The Salvation Army's Alan Staines organised memorial quilts to be made to remember Australians who have died by suicide.
This is the completed one.
They'll be unveiled at an international conference in Sydney later this month, looking at suicide prevention and better ways to support people affected by suicide.
Those that are left behind are 9 times higher the risk of the normal person for suicide. And not only that, the stigma that they have in many cases, they just don't know where to turn. There's very little, up till recent times, there's been very little help for them.
Heather Bradley is one of hundreds of lives remembered on the memorial quilt. After her death, her father John joined a Victorian support group run by volunteers called the Compassionate Friends.
It's never lost me, that feeling that I got that night. It was just relief. There was somebody that understood who exactly what I was going through and what I had been through.
John Bradley is now president of the Compassionate Friends.
We can go and visit people in their own homes or a cafe nearby or something like that. We can meet them to have a cuppa and ease people in. Some people might be too frightened of a crowd. They don't want to go with other people that have been bereaved. Some of them might find it too confrontational.
That was my main saviour, I think, talking with other people, how they felt and what I experienced, some of those people experienced the same things.
Don't try and do it on your own, Go and get help. Speak to somebody, talk to somebody that's been through it, and you will find that it isn't your fault. It was never your fault. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter how many times you say over and over again, I should have, I could have, in hindsight. It's happened, you can't change it. And it is that person that has ultimately made that choice.
Lifting the veil on suicide is the first step in removing the sense of stigma. In the past, convention dictated any media reporting of a death by suicide should use the euphemism "no suspicious circumstances." But last year, the Australian Press Council changed the media guidelines to allow a death to be identified as a suicide with the permission of the family.
I think there should be reporting of suicide and let people know that these things are happening, but done in such a way that it's not going to cause anyone else to really think about taking their life. Not go into the grim details, and then giving the follow-up of where their support can be given.
John Bradley says greater openness will make it a little easier for the family and friends left behind.
It is okay to talk about death. It's okay to talk about suicide. It's not contagious. People are not going to get it from us. We ask people to walk with us, to greet us with open arms, not with closed minds.
For people bereaved by suicide, you can get help by calling the Salvation Army's 24/7 National Hope Line 1300 467 354. If you look at the letters and numbers on your phone, 1300 Hope Line.